Oh yeah, that was important. Thanks, Dr. Lana. And then we have Fatma Umar. She has also worked as a student partner with us in the spring in 2021. And then we have Saud. Saud has also worked with us as a student partner. And I think Saud, are you here? Can you hear us or you're not? I think he's not here. Okay, I think he may join us in a while. So I'll just quickly tell you guys about the structure of this panel discussion. So we haven't structured it very tightly. So what we're going to do is we have three main questions that we want you guys to answer. You might have just seen it already because I was just playing across with the slides. So yeah, the three questions, and we will ask you to take about 7 minutes, each one of you, and you can cover the response to, you can maybe respond to all three of them, or maybe anyone if you want to, and then we'll open the floor for the students to ask the questions. So yeah, that's about it. And anyone can go first. We have no preference. Minhal, Fatma, Sophia, anyone can, you can introduce yourself and start responding to the question.
Okay, I think I'll go first. Hi everyone, as Fatma has already introduced me, I'm Minhal Aftab and I'm an MGS senior here at LUMS. This was my first partnership in the summers, and to be very honest, I started this partnership because I was in search of internships and I wanted to do a remote internship because of the whole COVID situation, but I was unable to find one. And then I came across this email from LLI and I was like, okay, why not? And trust me, it was just half an hour before the deadline that I applied to this program. And when I got this email, I was very surprised. But I was really passionate about this because marketing is like, I redesigned a course with Ma'am Sara Pervez, which is called, the course is called Principles of Marketing. And I was always very passionate about marketing. I wanted to do an internship in marketing and I wanted to know, what goes into marketing. So I think this was a very good starter pack for me to get into a course redesign. The whole procedure was really great. So if we talk about the first question that you have here, Fatma, okay, what have you learned from being a student partner? I think my biggest takeaway was that there goes a lot into designing a course. There are different stakeholders involved. There is a student's perspective and then there is a teacher's perspective, right? And at times we students, we think that, the teacher is being very harsh and why are they giving so many quizzes, or, why is a project like this and that? But after this partnership, I came to realize that if an instructor wants their student to learn, and to learn from different styles. For example, one quiz is also a style of learning, right? You get to retain some information, but if you talk about the project, it's like practical hands-on learning. So that's something I think I learned. Okay, in the retrospect, both of these stakeholders, they're extremely and equally important. And this initiative that LLI has taken, I think this is the best way to incorporate the student's perspective into any course. I remember Ma'am Sara Pervez, she was very receptive to all the changes that we suggested. We said that, ma'am, I think we shouldn't be repeating the companies that we give to students every year for projects, because it causes a kind of redundancy, and like students tend to ask for sample projects from their seniors and then they try to copy it, and there's just very less learning, and then there's just very less brainstorming of their own. So that is something she incorporated, and she asked the students to come up with their own company suggestions this time. And I'm even TAing her course now, so I get to see that's being incorporated. So, and secondly, I think I also got a lot of access to resources. For example, I got to know that you can make summaries on LMS, how to design tests and quizzes, and then we also did a run through of the course design that we had made over the summers. So that was also very good, I think. And if I move on to the second question, why did you choose to get involved in student partnership program? I think I answered that before, that I was looking for an internship and I was like, okay, why not this? And to be honest, I think I'm very glad with my experience. This might seem like a very, weird comment, but the thing that the fact that I was paid well, I felt that my contributions were valued as compared to an internship that I did last year. Trust me, I was paid so much less than this, but I worked like I think 12 hours a day in that internship, along with like field visits, and it was a multinational company. So I was very disappointed in after that experience. But when I saw that LLI is taking my input and everything, I'm getting an equal say. We used to have these meetings where Fatma used to ask us if we're facing any issues and all of that. So I felt valued, and that's something I think that was my best decision to be involved in the student partnership as well. Lastly, how would I describe the experience? I think it was a very exciting experience, and there was a lot of mutual learning and growth. And Ma'am Sarah always asked for our input, and when I felt valued, I think that describes my experience. That I was very happy with my experience, and I would love to work with LLI in the future. Like, I have one semester left, but I would love to work with you guys again. So yeah, that's it from my side.
Thank you very much, Minhal, for sharing. I think it was so wonderful to hear your experience. And I know we have talked already about it, in different meetings at various points, but hearing it all over again from you, it's very nostalgic, and also the examples that you're giving, I think it's very empowering. You were talking about learning new things and also being valued, and also feeling like you're being heard, and then that is motivating you even more to contribute further. I think that really makes me feel like, one of the goals or objectives that we had for the programs that have the student voices included in the course design. So I think we got it, we nailed it. So thank you so much for sharing that. So who wants to go next? Fatma, Sophia?
I can go next.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll start with first introductions. I'm Sophia Abbott.
Yeah.
I'm a doctoral student at George Mason, and I did student faculty partnerships as an undergraduate at Bryn Mawr College between 2012 and 2015, and then I've continued to work in this field in higher education, sort of at different universities, studying how we do teaching and learning together since then. So I will start with how I sort of chose to get involved in the program. For me, it was because a professor invited me to. So I had a professor who said, Sophia, there's this program at Bryn Mawr called Students as Learners and Teachers, where students can partner with faculty. And I think you would be really interested in doing that. You should apply. And she sent me the application. This is a professor in education. I had taken a course with her about social class in the school systems in the US. And in that class, I've gotten really excited about thinking about, how classrooms are and how people talk to one another, and especially how classrooms can sometimes reproduce inequities in how we sort of do things. I knew all of the clues for how to respond correctly in a classroom, correctly, quote unquote. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that, my upbringing really supported me to be heavily involved in education. I came from a white upper middle class background that taught me how to speak in the sort of discourse that is approved in schools. So all of those things helped me be really successful. And so that sort of reflecting on that was something that sort of carried into the partnerships that I then did. So the professor who ran the program, Alison Cook-Sather, was super supportive of me sort of thinking about all of these things in my partnerships, and my faculty partners as well were really all very curious about, what does it mean to be engaged in the classroom? What does engagement look like? Or how do we facilitate conversation in ways that are more equitable and inclusive and allow more voices to be present? So I got really, really excited about those things. So excited that I ended up developing my own self-designed major, which was called Educational Identities and Empowering Pedagogy. And Dr. Cook-Sather was one of my advisors for my major, where I got to study sort of how teaching and learning works at the university level through my coursework. In terms of sort of the implications of that, I would say it's utterly life-changing. So from there, I sort of learned about the field of the scholarship of teaching and learning, which I know you'll be talking about in a couple of weeks, and got to sort of realize that there are people who work with faculty all the time to think about how teaching and learning works in the classroom. And that was something that I wanted to do as well, but I really wanted to do it in a student-centered way. In terms of what I've learned from being a student partner, I would say the major things that I've learned are around self-advocacy and diplomacy and feedback. So I think the major benefit was that I learned how to reflect on the kinds of feedback that I would like to give, especially critical feedback, and think about how can I frame this in a way that is kind and that is constructive, and that my partner can hear, and that won't cause them to become defensive or sort of shut down or feel too vulnerable about their own teaching practice, because teaching is such a personal endeavor. It is a really vulnerable sort of making process. And that's been huge. In my first job, I was working with a superior who the two of us didn't always see eye to eye in the way that work happens. And there are a number of opportunities where I began to advocate for myself, and I used the skills that I learned in these partnership spaces to make critical suggestions that my superior could hear, which is something that I think a lot of people don't always get the chance to develop. It's a skill that's really, really crucial for just sort of living in the world. And it's gone into, I'm in academia. It informs how I give feedback on peer-reviewed journal articles. It informs how I give feedback when I'm working with students as a mentor. So the ability to frame feedback in a way that other people can hear is really crucial. And I don't want to take up too much time, so I guess I'll leave it for now, and you can ask more questions and I can share more about my experience in a bit. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sophia, for sharing. And also, I think you've made a lot of contribution to the literature as well. And it reflects in the experience that you're sharing, because the things that you're saying are reminding me of a couple of readings that, we have involved in the course, because, and our students know that we have had a chance to look at the power framework as a part of the Power of Partnership book. We have benefited from it, and I think it's a great contribution. So thank you very much, and we will have more questions for you as we go forward in this discussion. For now, I'll give it to Fatma. Yes, Fatma.
Yeah. Thank you, Fatma. So hi guys, I'm Fatma Omer. I just completed my MPhil in Education Leadership Management from LUMS. And that's where in my last semester, that's when I did the partnership. So the reason that I did apply for the partnership was that because, so my degree was very education focused, but there was no course that was specifically about course design. You do learn a few things here and there, but there's no course where you actually get to submit like a course that you've designed as a project or something. So I always wanted that sort of experience, that I wanted to see what goes into that when you're practically doing it. So that's why I was sort of interested in LLI, and also because I think Dr. Lana and Fatma are great. So I just thought I'd want to be involved with them. So I think that's sort of why. But so I'll answer the other two questions probably like meshed up together. So so I think I would want to start with like what I learned about myself, because that's something that I actually did the reflective piece with Dr. Allison, and that was really helpful to sort of understand my own journey, because before that I was sort of focused more on the partnership. So I'll start with mine and then move to the partnership. So for me, I realized that initially in the partnership, I was very keen on doing what my faculty partner wanted me to do. Like they sort of guided the whole process. And so I realized that a lot of that comes from the fact that like, when you're growing up in Pakistan. So even like, even coming from a privileged background, a very privileged private school and everything, there's still that sort of thing that the teacher is probably right and they know what they're doing. Even in your, TA-ships and your RA-ships and everything, you're still sort of, you have that job role, the teacher tells you what to do, you do it and everything, you get feedback for that. So it's very hard to sort of point out to a teacher that, maybe something that we're doing is wrong, maybe we can do it differently. So and I think it's not even about the fact that we don't have the skill, we don't even know that we're allowed to do that. Like, very unconsciously we're bound to, I think maybe it's a sense of respect that we have or something that we've been taught. So that relationship is very one way. Even if the teacher is great, even if they're very open to suggestions, that sort of upbringing, I feel like, really affected things. So yeah, so basically when I did move, I there was a point where we were stuck in our partnership, where we were really struggling with developing this one tool that we really wanted to include, and we would spend weeks over it. So I think it was a combination of my anxiety and the fact that, oh, we're running out of time, we need to move on and everything, that I did have to bring that up, that maybe that's something we can leave for later. Let's work on everything else. Maybe we can do the, as in, I sort of felt like there was a point where I had to lead the faculty partner away from where we were stuck to actually move on to a different sort of task. And of course, of course, I had to be diplomatic as well, and saying that we will work on it later. And I understand the importance of it, but as in, I just felt like instead of not doing anything and being stuck, maybe we can either separate tasks. So like, we logistically worked it all out. And so it was very fascinating to see that the faculty partner was incredibly open to the idea, and they were incredibly excited to work away from that. And they were so I think that was sort of a learning moment for me, that the faculty, because it was a new course, I know that the faculty hadn't designed a similar course anyways, so I knew that there was a struggle, that as in, you really don't notice that your teachers may be struggling as well. So I think the moment when I said that maybe we can move away from that, and I'm open to doing something different, so I think and when she really agreed to that, and when she was very open to that, I think that really helped me understand her better and understand the partnership better. And that's when I think things became a lot more smoother. So I think so that was a very important point, and I think so that was important for me as well. For the partnership, the things that I learned about the partnership was that course design, no matter what end you're on, like as a student, you always feel like, oh, this is like maybe it's a difficult course, maybe it's an easy course, but it's very turbulent at the end of the faculty as well. Like designing the courses, seeing what would work, what won't work, what sorts of readings to put in, all that thought, like you never really realize the amount of thought that goes into designing a course until you actually, I guess, design a course. So so I think that was an interesting thing to learn from the partnership as well. And apart from that, I think being reflective even during the process, like after the first transition moment, I think being reflective throughout, and really thinking about both stakeholders and the the strengths that they bring, that the student, because I was the student, and so I could really bring the perspective that what sorts of assignments would work, and what sorts of assignments students would even enjoy doing, because the course was the sort where it was a dry mathematical sort of course. So I was really excited about designing assignments which were useful to the students specifically, so and enjoyable. So I think that was I think realizing and sort of respecting that sort of different stakeholders aspect of things was very important. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Fatma. It's very you give a very holistic picture of your partnership experience, and I think it's great. And especially, I want to pick up on that point where you said that sometimes we don't realize that our faculty partner would also be struggling, because I think as students we are so used to seeing them as experts that we think that, oh, they know everything, they got everything figured out, they don't they don't need so much help, they're the experts. But this pedagogical partnership, it really helps the student to see the faculty member as a human being as well, that they also need support, they're also there. And Dr. Lana is a faculty member here, so she has already raised her hand. So Dr. Lana, please.
No, it's just, I just wanted to follow up on your comment, Fatima, about, we have 3 Fatimas here today, just.
Yeah.
But just about, like, I was listening to your story, trying to like put myself into the shoes of your faculty partner and think it must have been a bit of a relief to, I think it was a her you were working with, right? It was a female. It must have been a bit of a relief for her that you could come to her and propose a solution, because oftentimes we're, you know, going in 70 different directions, and the partnership is one thing out of, you know, 70 that we've got going on. And sometimes it's just too much to think about, okay, like, how do I solve this problem here, right? We're stuck. Okay, let's just pause it. It's just an easy thing to do, is to just put things on pause, right? But it is a relief when someone, especially a student partner in this case, can come to you and say, no, we don't have to pause this. It's okay, we can move this forward. I have an idea, right? And that's probably one of the pieces of advice I give my students too, is if you're coming to me with a problem, try to come with at least one, you know, idea in mind for moving forward as well, right? And we can discuss that. So just wanted to point that out. I appreciated that comment.
Thank you very much for adding, Dr. Lana. It's always lovely to hear and always lovely to see you jumping in and adding more to the conversations. I'll open the floor for the students. So we have, collected some questions from all of you already, and I can ask them on your behalf for sure, but it would be great if you guys could contribute more, because then it will become more interactive. So I'd love if you guys would turn on your video. Oh yeah, Sophia, do you have something to add?
Oh, I just wanted to respond to, is it Unsa's question in the chat?
Unsa, yes.
Unsa, okay, great. Just because I think that's the sort of parallel to some of what we've just been talking about in terms of offering feedback, or offering maybe a solution to an issue that you're noticing. I've definitely worked with a number of faculty partners who are just excellent people and excellent instructors. Most of my faculty partners actually have been excellent instructors. And I would say that's usually the case, because they're the folks that are really interested in working on their teaching and are very intentional about it. So most often the people that I think are working in partnership are already bringing a lot of strengths to the work that they're doing. And I would say one of the major things I learned with sort of alongside the skill of giving feedback is that the ability to highlight a strength and why something is a strength in what someone is doing is as useful, if not sometimes more so, than identifying, you know, this is going wrong or this isn't working. So yeah, I would say like the framing things as, you know, these are strengths that you are bringing to this work, and specifically naming, you know, this is why I'm seeing this as something that is working really well is super, super helpful for folks. And it helps them know, you know, what can I keep doing, or what can I sort of do more of in my classroom.
Yeah, thank you, Sophia. I think that was a very apt response, and I think we also hear very similar questions during our classes as well, and we keep addressing them, and it's also great to hear your perspective on it. Thank you. So guys, you can raise your hand and ask questions, or also send in the chat.
So folks, one of the reasons that Fatima and I got you to write your questions down beforehand is because we got a chance to look at them, and they're all great questions. Yeah. So we have this wonderful group with us for the both till the end of class. So let's hear some of those questions, because I think it's going to take our discussion in a really important and interesting direction. So please jump in.
Yes, Mariam, please go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, hello everyone. So I just had a question in regards to a very practical question, that how do you think we can actually encourage, universities on a larger scale to kind of encourage instructors who might actually need reform in their course to kind of sign up for such programs? Because I've noticed that in LUMS and in other universities, instructors themselves sign up for it. So naturally, these are people, who are willing to change or who are more receptive of this stuff. But as a student, I've noticed, sometimes I'm like, I wish that this, now that I know about the pedagogical program, sometimes I'm just sitting and wondering, I wish this teacher had, a student partner or someone like that. So how do you think we could encourage that?
I would like to answer that briefly. I think this is an institutional change. For example, like I see LUMS doing it right now, right? Like in my freshman year, I'm not sure if this used to happen because, as Mariam said, there are a lot of courses I would want to redesign, with the instructors. But I think it's an institutional change, and the institution itself should make it compulsory for all the instructors to revisit their courses after like 1 or 2 years. For example, trust me, if I still go to some resources on LDF, I find the same kind of quizzes for the courses that I'm studying right now, right? Even the questions don't change. So that means that your learning is restricted in that way as well, because that it's the same system, it's the same question. So why do I feel motivated to learn more? So I think it should be compulsory. In my opinion, the institution itself should make it compulsory for the instructors to revisit their courses every now and then, and keep a record of it, so that the contemporary world and the contemporary learning is incorporated into all of these courses.
And just to like add, like I don't know, because like when you asked, I just thought of one specific thing that LUMS could possibly do is that, so right now LLI is just gaining that sort of popularity, and I'm imagining the more instructors are signing up now, because so I think one interesting thing that possibly could be done would be that we do have course evaluations at the end of each semester, right? So those are very teacher centered. They are course centered as well, but they're more about your experience and less about there's a less focus on suggestions, I think. So if like if a student partner could like maybe evaluate a course even without a teacher and sort of give those sorts of insights, so maybe the teacher would sort of realize the importance of having someone who's a student really evaluate a course, and that would sort of help gain that popularity even more. So yeah, so that was just something that maybe.
And I wanted to follow up on that. I have a slightly different perspective than Minhal in terms of compulsory partnerships, only because I've seen some partnerships where instructors have felt pressured to participate and then responded really poorly to their students' feedback. And I don't think it's fair for their student partner to have to experience that sort of defensiveness or rejection of the process or things like that. But I do think there's a way, and so maybe I have a more conservative perspective on it, but I do think there's a way for slower but still sort of momentous change to happen. And I do think what Minhal, you and Fatima both identified in terms of changing culture is really important here. And I've seen examples of, so first I would say, I think the more instructors do it, I think the more instructors who would really, really benefit from this will feel more inclined to do it, because they're seeing their colleagues participate in a program like this and finding it affirming or finding it transformative or helpful. I would say some of it has to do with marketing. So one way that I would talk about these programs with instructors is by framing it as an opportunity to really learn from your students about what they're experiencing, because you've been separated from the student experience for a fair amount of time. Even for folks who were sort of recently doctoral students, for example, who are sort of newly in a faculty position, even then the experience of being a doctoral student is different from being an undergraduate or master's student, and the way that you're experiencing the classroom looks different. And so having an opportunity for folks to learn from that sort of grounded student experience is something that sometimes pushes people to be more receptive to this kind of work, instead of only thinking of it as a change making or fixing of problems type of work together. And I do think, yes, I think what you're sharing here in the chat about where cultural differences come into play is really, really relevant. Definitely in the United States, I think faculty are very used to having lots of autonomy and independence over what they do in the classroom. And I know that that doesn't look the same in every context. So I think that's also part of where some of the hesitancy comes from, or conservativeness comes from, because yes, I think there's a higher chance of rejection in a system where instructors especially are really used to having a lot of control over their classroom spaces and aren't used to other folks sort of coming in and giving them feedback or collaborating with them on their teaching.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting perspective, and thank you for really breaking it down. I think it was very insightful. So having two different perspectives for the same questions. Thank you, Minhal. Thank you, Fatma. Thank you, Sophia, for sharing. Dr. Lana, yes, your hand must be tired of being raised.
Well, it's not my real hand.
Yeah.
You might be tired of seeing it there. I just wanted to add one thing on top of this from another, like from the LUMS perspective and the faculty perspective. The other thing too is that many of the faculty here are on, if they're newer faculty, if they're assistant professors, they're on a career progression path towards obtaining tenure. If a professor is an associate professor, then as you know, they've already obtained tenure, and people have different goals for their career, right? And up until probably a couple of months ago, LUMS wasn't doing a great job at measuring teaching effectiveness for tenure and promotion. Really, so I sat on a committee with the provost and this big committee who decided, no, we want to raise the bar higher and make teaching count here. So we've come up with 6 criteria for teaching effectiveness that all teachers at LUMS, all faculty are going to have to demonstrate. I'll leave it at that because it could go into a longer discussion. But the point to say here is that the incentives for people to develop their teaching haven't really been there historically at LUMS. Very much, I guess, Sophia, it's a similar context. Faculty are used to having total autonomy over, what they do in their courses, and so on. So, I think things are starting to change here slowly, but they are starting to change. And when something like pedagogical partnership or student faculty partnership can be tied to showing faculty how this can help them in career progression by helping their teaching, that's when I think we will see more people, wanting to take us up on these opportunities. I think we'll always have lots of students who want to do this, but you're right, it's the faculty, right? That we need the faculty part of the student faculty partnership for this to even fly. So I think we're making strides, as someone was saying about how the program's marketed. This course is brand new, so we're trying to give students another option and faculty another option for becoming involved. So yeah, it's very astute that you brought that up, because I think it's critical, and the institution does have to play a role in really bolstering these kinds of initiatives. So that's all I wanted to say.
I think, Dr. Lana, this has been one of the burning questions that we have been talking about in our own meetings as well, that how do we get more faculty on board? And I'm very happy that we discussed this, and thank you, Mariam, for bringing this up. I think it was one of the most important questions. I see some other questions in the chat box, and just had to go a little bit up. So Zoha asks, how did you retain objectivity, especially in cases where your bias as a student was unavoidable?
So for me, I have sort of two dueling perspectives. The first is a sort of ideological perspective, I guess, which is that I don't necessarily agree that the goal of your work should be to maintain objectivity. Like, I think your perspective as a student and the biases that you have as a student are actually really essential to this work, and why it's valuable for students and instructors to partner, because they're partnering with you because they want to know what you what you think, and what you are experiencing as a student, and that is sort of what makes this work. And yet I definitely worked on developing sort of objective ways of representing what I was seeing in the classroom. So I don't know whether you have any particular note-taking systems or things like that that you use in your teaching, but or in your observations, but I use the sort of 3-column system that I think that Dr. Cook-Sather has shared in a couple different resources, where I marked the time, and I marked in the middle column exactly what I was seeing, just sort of the things I was seeing. And then I use the 3rd column to say, like, this is how I'm interpreting this, or this is how I'm making sense of this. And I did make sure to be really explicit about saying, this is in my opinion, as Sophia, the student, not as a representative for all students. This is why I value this thing, or this is why I'm sort of troubled by this, or this is how I would interpret what I'm seeing here. The other thing I started doing was mapping the classroom. So I started drawing maps of where people were sitting. I put sort of circles to indicate folks' heads, and I would draw sort of semicircles around them every time they participated, with sort of thin lines to show like a one-word response, or a short sort of like yes or no sort of a response, versus thicker lines to show this was sort of a substantial contribution to the conversation. It was a question that shifted the discussion or dialogue, or it was a sort of theoretical sort of connection making or sense making response. And I would draw sort of lines across the different individuals to show the direction that conversation was moving in the classroom. And I did this in lecture classrooms as well. So, you know, in those, a lot of the lines were just back and forth from student to professor, where a student would ask a question to clarify and the professor would respond. But all of those sort of helped show different patterns that happen in the way we speak to one another. So for example, in a lecture classroom, I saw in a physics classroom that the professor had a tendency to look to just one side of the classroom. There was a student who was especially vocal there, and he was just sort of used to getting a solid response because it's uncomfortable to sit in silence. And so what we did was we just asked students to move where they sat one day. And it meant he was still looking to that spot, but suddenly a different student was there and they felt sort of compelled to respond. And by doing that more frequently, more students sort of entered the conversation. So I would say, like, still everything that you're noting is inflected by your experience and your perspective, but there are, I think, some tools that you can use to try to get a less, I guess, emotion-filled or more sort of distanced perspective on what you're seeing. And all of those are ways that you can then sort of embrace your perspective or biases to interpret what is happening in the classroom. And I can share an article about the mapping, sorry, if that's something you're interested in.
Yeah, please do that. If you want to share that right away in the chat, you can do that. Otherwise, just forward it to me and I'll share it with the rest of the class. Fatma, do you guys want to add something to it?
So I think I sort of agree with Sophia as well, that so as in, I wouldn't look at it as my biasness. I would probably look at it more as the sort of reflexivity that I could add as a student. Like, as in, I remember that, like, while thinking of every aspect of the course, I would think of it as in, I would think of my faculty partner as someone who should sort of encompass every good teacher that I've had. So, I would think back to all the great teachers that I've had, and and not great because I liked listening to them, but also great because of the sort of course that they had, the sort of assignments that they had, the sort of quizzes that they designed. So I would really pay attention to that, and then I would want to sort of bring that perspective into the sort of course that we design. So so as in I think a lot of it, like, because so our course was on um, like blockchains, and it was very mathematical, it was very serious scientific, it was a scientific course but for business school students, so it was not very in depth, but it was like exposure to a very new concept, at least for me. So so it was very interesting because, like, even within that we added assignments which used things like movies, or which used things like, you know, reflective essays to sort of understand and apply those sort of concepts into their into their environment. So I think a lot of that came from the different assignments that I've gotten, and where I really enjoyed doing them because they were so practical. So I think so I think it was more about applying all of those instead of like, you know, as in it was about designing something that students enjoyed and would remember. So I think that was probably the main objective, instead of the biasness, like, as in, yeah.
Okay, so you mean like you thought about all the best practices that you have experienced
Yes.
as a student that have contributed to your learning, and you thought to bring that in.
Yeah. So I
Right.
thought about things like from my undergrad, I thought about things from my master's. So yeah, so all the best professors that and you can all, obviously you can think of who those were. Those are people whose courses you still remember even after you know, so long. So I think the assignments and how you choose to design assignments for students get to apply that knowledge and everything. So I think that's a very integral part of remembering a course. So yeah, so I think that's how.
Thank you for sharing, Fatma. Minhal, I remember you wanted to say something as well.
No, I think Sophia and Fatma, they've covered it all. One thing that I really liked what Sophia said was that our biases, and what you call biases, quote unquote, that is what's needed in this partnership. So it's important that you let it out and you express it, rather than thinking that oh, am I being biased? No, you're supposed to add that perspective to this partnership. So I agree to that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. So Adan asks a question, what are the main challenges that you faced as a student partner, and how did you overcome them? And I request you guys to share maybe, you know, one of the main challenges, and then also how you overcame it. So if each one of you could share one, that would be great.
Okay, I'll start off. So I think one of the main challenges that I faced was also what Fatima asked, Fatima Ilahi has asked in the chat box, to convince and convey your point in a way that does not come across as being assertive, or you know, proving that my point is right. So that is one challenge that I think I faced. But the way I was able to overcome that challenge was a 2:1 principle that my dad taught me. He said that whenever you want to convince anyone anywhere, use this principle. So you tell them two good things about the thing that is already happening, or the thing that they have proposed, right? And then you point out the one major and one integral thing that you think can be changed, and you think can make a difference. And that is how you are basically encouraging them as well, and you're telling them how, you know, you're doing a great job and this thing has these two positive points. But I think, you know, that is how you phrase it. And I think it's all about phrasing, to be honest. You can say the same thing in a very offensive manner, and then you can say the same thing in a very nice manner and convincing manner. So that is the principle that I started using, and I think it worked so well for me. I used to go up to Ma'am Sarah and I used to tell her how, you know, the current project design is good in terms of number one and number two, but I think we should change it to this because of this reason. And I think a, it was the greatest tip that I have learned and used in my life up till now. So that's something I wanted to say.
That's very profound how you put it, like, you know, something that you learned from your dad and you're also applying it into the partnership experience. So thank you very much for sharing. Sophia, Fatma, do you guys have anything to add?
So I think my challenge was what I talked about already, like the struggling to communicate how I felt. So I think and because of that, like I know that I brought it up with Fatma and Humayun as well during our meetings as well, that this is something that we are sort of consistently struggling with. And I felt like it was slowing down progress because I think for me it's also another struggle was that because this was a partnership for a semester and it was something paid, it felt like a job as well, right? So I really wanted to get the work done as well. As in, it was very hard for me to understand that, more than the course outline that we design, the partnership and how we sort of develop that partnership is also a goal of this entire role. So I think that's another thing that I sort of struggled with, to understand the objective of the whole partnership, because I thought the first priority partnership, the first priority goal is to sort of design the course and make sure that all components are within it, and then sort of submit that, and that's what matters. So I think it was a lot of conversations with Fatma where she really tried to explain that, even if your course is missing, even if there's a few missing components, the idea is to first work on the partnership. So I think at that point, that really helped to sort of communicate that to the professor as well, to the faculty partner as well, that we can, even if we don't get this one component in, it's fine. We can, like, so that sort of helped have that conversation as well, because it was easier to sort of say that this is not the only objective we have. So I think in doing that, we sort of were able to communicate better and sort of build that partnership. And because that became that big moment where we were now open to listening to each other even more. So I think that's what, so I think that's how we sort of overcame the whole issue as well. Yeah.
And I think for me, one of the biggest challenges was related to partnership, but also outside of it. So I was very lucky to have really receptive faculty partners and have really, really positive experiences working in partnership. And I think that made being not in partnership with instructors very challenging for me, to go into other spaces and to be in classrooms that were sort of explicitly not partnered classrooms felt like, oh, do I have agency anymore? Like, I was in these spaces that felt so empowered and where I knew that my voice was valued in some of the ways that Fatima and Minhal have described. And then I was in these classrooms where I wasn't really sure if my voice mattered, actually, or I didn't feel that it was a space where my instructors might be receptive to feedback. And one thing that I worked on doing, one thing that I did actually was sort of game the system a little bit. So I started looking to take classes with people who I knew had done partnership with students in the past. And I don't know that approach works for everyone. And of course, it really depends on what the content area that they're teaching in is. But sometimes I would do that sort of regardless of content area, just because I had a feeling that they would be a good instructor. And I wanted that sort of positive learning experience more than, what the specific, whether it was an archaeology class on women in the ancient Near East, which was sort of not related at all to the kinds of topics I was doing. But I knew that the professor, I trusted that the professor would be receptive to my feedback because he had worked with student partners before. And I also trusted that he had already thought critically about his teaching. But then the other thing I did was I started approaching the way I gave feedback as questions. So I would meet with professors and ask, what do you mean by assigning that? Like, what are your goals for this particular assignment for our learning? Or why do we do these particular things in class? Like, tell me more about your process. And just having instructors sort of explain to me more about, or make explicit why they had particular teaching goals or what they hope to gain from assigning certain assignments or essays or other things in class, what their goals for our learning was, helped me to be a better student in those classes and helped me to be more empathetic and just helped me succeed. So I still had sort of a space of agency, even if I wasn't necessarily making change to the classroom in some of the collaborative ways that I might have been with my partners. I was able to learn better about how to be a better student. And that is a skill that I continue to use today.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, and also the trick to asking questions and to make them tell you that, you know, why is it important, why are we doing this. And I think Dr. Lorna and myself, this also happens with us, that sometimes whenever I suggest something, and Dr. Lorna always asks me that, what is the goal of this? Why do we want to do this? I think that really helps. And I think as a student partner, it would also help if you feel like at any point you feel stuck and maybe you know, you're unable to, you know, convince someone or something like that. You can ask a question, and that would just, you know, open a space for dialogue. And this is something that we recently talked about in one of our previous classes. So I think we're still in the process of learning that, but thank you for sharing. I'll take another question from the chat box. It's Fatma. She says, what is the best strategy to convey constructive criticism? I think Minhal's dad gave us a very interesting strategy. I think that is one of the best strategies that you can use. Unless any of you, like Fatma or Sophia, you guys want to add something to it other than that. Yeah, Sophia, please go ahead.
Well, I want to connect this question to the one that Aisha just asked, which is, how do you deal with situations where after repeatedly bringing up a certain concern or criticism, they acknowledge it, but they don't sort of incorporate that feedback into their class? And I think that's sort of closely related. I think Minhal's suggestion for positives or affirmations is really important and helpful, and is definitely a tool that I've used successfully as well. But when I felt sort of stuck in a space where I've sort of shared, look, like these certain people in the class, for example, are never getting an opportunity to share. And if, for example, the professor says, well, it's not my job to sort of force them into the space or things like that, I have to acknowledge that it is a partnership, right? So the point is that we are collaborating together, and I will not always be the person who, my partner shouldn't always accept my sort of suggestions for change outright without any comment. That's not really how it works. But instead, this is an opportunity for us to learn more from one another about sort of what, you know, well, if there's this concern that you're sort of continually feeling, why is it, what is it about this element of the classroom that they acknowledge that they feel they don't have the power to change, for example, or they don't have the power to respond to, or so I guess that's one thing. And I think doing that with your partner also helps your partner to be more explicit in their classroom to their students about why they are doing particular things. But sometimes you're not going to be able to sort of change someone's mind about something. Sometimes there are just ideological differences about teaching and learning that you hold that can't be worked through. And this is something that Dr. Cook-Sather and I actually explored together in some writing fairly recently about sort of productive critique and what does it mean to be in disagreement? And I think it's okay to sit in disagreement for a while as partners and sort of explore what that space means for you, even when it feels frustrating.
I'd like to add something here, because, you know, someone who has worked closely with students, I also see that, you know, it can be very frustrating when things are not working out. And I have seen Dr. Donna and myself, we have seen some partnerships not working out. And initially, when it happened for the first time, I was very taken aback. But with the passage of time, it took me some time as well to come to terms with the fact that no matter how hard you try, partnership is just like a relationship, and it may fail because of the differences and disagreements. And no matter, I'm sure that everybody wants all the relationships to work, but they don't work for a reason. So I think it's a hard pill to swallow. But no matter how good intentions you have, how positive you are, but it may not work sometimes. So I think it's a tricky thing to sit with. But yeah, thank you for sharing, Sophia. There's another question which is very interesting that Amna Shahid is asking. So she's basically asking, what are some of the no-go areas in the faculty-student partnerships? And I read the question. She asks, what have been some of the things that you have realized through your experience that one should not be doing in a faculty partnerships? No-go areas.
I think I would like to point one thing out. Never challenge an instructor's authority. That's also something you should be respectful of, not just like out of respect, but also the fact that they're there for a reason, right? The reason you're a student right now and your growth process is still going on, and if there's an instructor who has done their PhD and they worked so hard with all the studies and everything, and they're constantly learning, they're writing papers, they're working on projects, never question their authority and try to understand their perspective. I think from experience, I'm telling this, that my co-student partner, once we were like, okay, why is the CP 20% in this course, right? And we asked our instructor that, why is it such a big component of the course when we clearly know that there are a certain set of students who participate in class and the rest of them, they just feel overwhelmed by those certain students, right? But then we got to know that the class participation is such a big chunk of that specific course because, you know, the theory part, it's very basic. And you need to know certain examples in class to move forward, and you need people to add value to the class that is going on. You can't just take people, you can't just bear people being quiet, blank screens, and saying nothing. So that is a kind of incentive for them to speak. And that is something I understood after she explained it to us, that it's very important, in especially in Pakistan, like just for context, Sophia, in Pakistan, if you don't give a student an incentive, they will really speak. So the incentive was to get grades. The incentive was to score well in that 20% of your graded component, and that is how she made people speak. So yeah, that's something I wanted to say, that the no-go area, I think, is to never question authority and to question the logic behind something that's happening already.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, Minhal, how you put it, because so in the values of partnership, we always talk with our students that you can challenge the instructor. It really depends how you do that, because like, so challenging for the sake of challenging and challenging for improvement in the course, I think these are two different things. Sophia, would you like to say something about it, because I know you have made a lot of contribution in the literature. So what is the best way to tackle the challenging and not challenging the authority?
Yeah, I think so I guess one element about authority that that I think it has been helpful for me to acknowledge as a student the amount of content expertise that my faculty partners have. And one thing that has always helped me to do that better is to partner with people who are far outside of the sort of studies or disciplines that I'm used to studying, because it helps me sort of separate myself from that content. So working with a physics professor, an astrophysics professor, was amazing because there was no question I had very, very little background in astrophysics. I had no idea what he was doing in terms of the derivations of mathematical concepts on the board. And so it helped me really, really focus in on, okay, what is the teaching that's happening, or what is the student engagement that's happening? And so I guess a no-go area, I think, connected to what Minhal is talking about, is that there are, I think, content questions that may be really difficult for you to have any perspective on, and that maybe it doesn't make sense for you to have perspective on, because you know, you haven't been in that discipline for as long, or you haven't been in that field for as long, but you always have the authority to talk about your student experience and to share your expertise as a student in the course. And I did see that you all read the article Legitimizing Student Expertise by Haley Burke, and it's one of my favorite articles to return to because I think it's a great reminder that our naivete in a space can be really, really powerful, or our asking questions can be really powerful.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this, Sophia. And I also think that, you know, it really means that what is the goal of challenging? Like, why are you challenging someone? So I think as a student partner, this is something where the tricks come in, that you have to apply those skills that you're learning with the process. Okay, this is what I want to do. This is what I not want to do. And I also think that no-go areas may vary for each partnership depending upon the context. Yeah, Sophia.
Sorry, just had another quick thought, which is that I've worked with a number of, when I was running a partnership program at Trinity University in Texas, I worked with a number of student faculty partnership teams with instructors who were newer, often younger, and often women. And one thing that we reflected on, the student partners and I reflected on together, was the way that bias comes out in student feedback sometimes. So for example, one of the students in a partnership with a young female professor heard feedback from other students in the course that said, you know, this professor isn't confident enough, or she's always changing her mind, or, you know, this is a useless assignment, or this is a useless class activity. And the sort of underlying theme of that feedback was not necessarily that the teacher was doing anything wrong, but was that the students sort of had a perception of what professors should be like based on often older white men, and that they were bringing that bias into their understanding of what was happening in this classroom. And so I would say a definite sort of no-go area is repeating that bias to instructors. And one thing that students and I reflected on together, and that I'm always thinking about, is there any kernel of useful feedback in that biased feedback? So perhaps the level of flexibility that the teacher had in her classroom was too confusing for students, or left them feeling that it was too unstructured and they didn't have sort of guidance for what to do. And that's useful feedback to give to an instructor, but you can always sort of censor feedback in terms of bias to protect your faculty partners from sort of continuing to experience prejudice in these spaces. And that's certainly, I think, a universal experience and shows up in different ways in the classroom. And it's also, I think, really useful for students to sort of reaffirm instructors developing their own pedagogical styles based on their identities and what they're bringing themselves to the classroom, regardless of how you individually have experienced classrooms.
Yeah, and it reminds me of an incident that happened in one of our partnerships. And in our class, we also discussed this, that so there is a forum where some of the students, they put in their comments or their experience about the faculty member. So sometime when students joined an instructor's class, they would go and look them up. What have the other students said about this instructor? And that would really, you know, I don't know, like, you know, that's a potential for prejudice, right? Like you can bring in. But I remember in one of the classes, one of the students said that they deliberately chose not to do that because it would, you know, sort of taint their personal experience with that particular instructor. So I think it really echoes that again. Thank you for sharing perspective, Sophia, on this. We are left with last 5 minutes. I'm just going to quickly run through the chat and see if there are any other questions, which I don't see.
I have a question, if I could ask.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and apologies, I forget who brought this up first, but I think you all commented on it. You talked about a skill of giving feedback and having conversations, and how that carried into work outside of partnership. So I forget who talked about it first, but I was wondering, and this probably goes to people who've graduated, but maybe others who are still in school too can answer this. What skills, what did you learn in your partnership experiences that you find have benefited you now that you've kind of left the student partner role, or might potentially benefit you now that you've left the partnership role? So we're thinking like, after this class is over and people move on, what's the benefit of having learned these skills? So
so I can probably start. So after graduation, I started working at the advising and student success office at LUMS. So and I work on the student success domain. So that sort of focuses on creating different sorts of programs to enhance student well-being across academic and non-academic domains. For like marginalized student populations on campus. So it's very centered on developing sort of different programs. So I think the biggest skill that I sort of learned was the sort of recognition of different stakeholders and the needs that each stakeholder has. So because now I was on that end when I'm developing programs for different students. So I think, I'm sorry, there's everyone's waking up here. So there's a lot of commotion suddenly, but yeah. So I think it was so understanding what the student needs was a very integral part. So now whenever I pitch a sort of program, so I use two important skills. One is understanding student needs and also negotiating for them then. So that negotiation sort of understanding how to speak to my supervisor or how to speak to the administration at the university to sort of accept that program. So all of those are skills that did start developing during the partnership as well, because again, in the partnership, like I said, that actually communicating to the faculty partner what could have been done better is now translating into communicating with all these other stakeholders who are, again, there's someone with they are people with power dynamics where I am someone who's pitching things to them. So I think that was very important. That's a very important takeaway. And then again, and maybe I got lucky with the kind of work that I'm doing, but because of the kind of work I'm doing, it really focuses on what I can do best for the students. So I think that's again something where I can use the student side of my perspective to sort of design those programs as well. So I think those are my two primary takeaways. Yeah.
I sort of cheated in that I have continued to find ways to stay involved in student partnership because I loved it so much and I didn't really want to leave doing this kind of work. But I do think there are some overarching, in addition to feedback, there are some sort of overarching skills that I gained that have been super, super integral to the work that I'm doing and have been really helpful to other former student partners that I've seen sort of go out into the workforce in different ways. One is observation. I think the skill of being able to look and see themes and see sort of critical areas of strength or challenge, that's something that is important in any space. And in meetings, you'll get to observe these dynamics. In conferences and lots of different spaces, you'll be able to observe those dynamics and make insightful interpretations of what is happening in those spaces to help you be more successful in navigating them, or to help you in advocating for yourself or for others in different ways. I think the skill of question asking is so essential to be able to ask good questions to help yourself, to help others understand better what they're doing is really, really key in any field. And I think the skill of finding affirmations is really powerful. To notice people's strengths, I think is something that is sort of underused in our world. I think it's really common for people to sort of center around critique. And it's challenge. I think people are unused to being affirmed, and often sort of feel vulnerable without realizing that they're sort of constantly in a state of vulnerability. And I think that that's a skill also that you should turn on yourself. So, the pausing and thinking about, what am I grateful for that I have accomplished? Those are things that you can continue to use as you're working through your career. And then I think there are course design things that you might learn in these spaces that are relevant to any space. So I have a friend who talks about backward designing her life, where, you might think about backward designing course design. What are your learning goals and how are we going to work together to achieve them? You can think about that for your own life. What do I enjoy doing? What do I want to be doing? And how can I take steps, meaningful steps to get to that place? And that's something anyone can use in any space at all, just to continue to feel fulfilled in what they're doing, and to find sort of career paths and other sort of navigational steps for journeying through your life to be successful.
Thank you. Those are more than what I thought I would get from answering that question. So no, in a good way. That's excellent. It really helps. Like, I don't think we do that enough in higher education in our classes, like both as students. I mean, I remember being a student and not having these conversations enough about what am I learning here that, is going to help me later on, or what can this look like later on, right? So, I mean, take it from some people here who are at that stage or well past it, that we hope you're finding meaning not only in this course and in your partnership experiences, but in your other ones too. And we encourage you to ask those kinds of questions. And you know what? Ask them of your professors in the class. I don't necessarily mean your faculty partners. I mean the professors in your economics classes you're taking. We have a lot of economics students in this class, in your law courses, what have you. So Fatima, over to you to wrap it up.
Yeah, it was a lovely discussion. Thank you, Sophia, Fatma, Minhal, and thanks to all of our students for asking such important questions. I think we covered most of them, but if there are some left, I think we're just gonna shoot it to you over the email, and maybe you can respond if you would like to. But yeah, overall, I think we've covered most of the things that we wanted to discuss. And thank you so much for being here and for responding with such great examples. I think I'm out of the words. Thank you very much. And especially Fatma, I think you are traveling and you're still being there. And then Sophia, you were also, it was a little early for you to join. And Minhal, I know the fall semester is at the peak, but still you guys made time for it. Thank you very much. And to the rest of the class, I think I'm very grateful for all of you for being here and for asking such thoughtful questions. Cheers to all of us.
Thanks to everyone who participated. Thanks, Fatima, Sophia, Minhal. It was wonderful to have you and to meet you, Sophia, for the first time. Now we can put a face to the name in the articles we're reading in some of this class. So it's been a blast. Thanks so much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Great. Well, hopefully we can connect again. Lots of stuff happening. We'd love to have you come back.
Yeah.
Okay, class, we'll see you Wednesday. Have a great evening, and yeah, get out of here. Enjoy your evening. They're just waiting, like, tell us to go.
Yeah.
Anyway, take care.
Bye.